would you all please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, okay.
Nobody noticed it.
Hey,
Can we
Julie.
not have a meeting during beach time?
Can we switch everything around in place? Rotate the names.
Sorry. No more meetings during beach permit week.
But then we wouldn't have known who to blame.
Counselor, do you have yours?
When we do, yes. Yeah, you gave me one, so I will do that.
I thank you all for coming to this May 21st meeting. We got a couple of things here. There's nobody signed up for public comment, but does anybody would like to make a public comment? Okay, we move to board presentation. And first one, we have Ann Welker from Southampton Town Trustees.
Hi, everyone. How are you this evening?
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here tonight. My name is Ann Welker. I am a Southampton Town trustee, and I'm here today on behalf of Lake Agawam. I don't believe I need to remind you that the challenges that Lake Agawam is facing on multiple fronts: stormwater runoff, septic, wastewater treatment systems, overabundance of nutrients coming from multiple upland sources. But the village is to be commended on the projects that are either in progress or that they've undertaken to start to make a change in many of these issues. I am here today to propose a partnership between the Southampton Village Board of Trustees and the Southampton Town Board of Trustees. A partnership that would involve water quality monitoring for Lake Agawam. Dr. Christopher Gobler of Southampton Stony Brook has developed a proposal for a one-year pilot project that would begin as soon as we could get the funding together for it. It would involve a telemetry buoy, which would be placed in Lake Agawam. The telemetry buoy would monitor dissolved oxygen, temperature, chlorophyll, and blue-green algae. This buoy would register those parameters every 10 minutes from when the buoy was put in the spring until it was taken out in the fall. A handheld probe would also be monitoring these same parameters. I wish that I was standing here before you in spring of 2018 rather than now, so that we could have gotten a baseline before you did the work on Job's Lane Meeting House, all the stormwater runoff. I'm not. So I hope that we can establish a baseline at this point going forward. There's been sporadic water quality monitoring of Lake Agawam over the years. I looked on the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's harmful algal blooms page. They test monthly, sometimes weekly during the summer season. I know that Dr. Gobler did a study back in 2007 or 8, and I know that there was some data from that point in time, and I know that Surfrider tests the water in front of the outflow pipe near the Bathing Corporation. That's a whole different situation. I'm thinking that we need to know the why of this project, because there's certainly many opportunities to spend money on projects that could help the lake rather than data monitoring. So if we were to form this partnership, generate this data, we could use this data to look going forward at projects that we might seek funding for, and also to save money on projects so that we could target projects where it would actually make a difference rather than just sort of fishing about. Sorry to use that. In East Hampton Town, the town trustees have water quality studies that they've been doing on Georgia Pond since 2013. They partnered with the Friends of Georgia Society or Association, and they do have a telemetry buoy there. Their buoy is a little more advanced than this one would be. When Dr. Gobler submitted his initial proposal, he did have live stream data, but we asked him to reel it back in interest of cost efficiency. But the Georgia Pond data has allowed the trustees working with Friends of Georgia Pond to use an aquatic harvester, which is sort of like a tractor that gathers seaweed. And what they've done by doing that is take some of the nutrient-laden seaweed out of the pond and therefore diminish the amount of nutrients that are in the pond. And they believe that that started to make a difference. Mauritius Bay Project also has a telemetry buoy, or several of them actually. They use their water quality data to look at the salinity so that their oysters have the proper amount of salinity and are healthy. In Mecox Bay, the town trustees also are water testing so that we too, have water quality that's an appropriate 20 parts per 20, a level of salinity is above 20, and the dissolved oxygen is also high enough so that the oyster population there is healthy. So now here's the hard part. Gulp. In order to accomplish this partnership, a letter of support from the Village Board of Trustees would be necessary, and also a financial contribution. Dr. Gobler's proposal is for this pilot project, this one-year pilot project, is for $10,000. The partnership would enable that $10,000 to be divided in half, $5,000 for the town trustees and $5,000 for the village trustees, if we were able to and agreed to go forward with this. It's my wish that this board would see the critical need for data generated through water quality monitoring for Lake Agawam and agree to go forward with this partnership. Thank you so much for your time and your attention this evening.
And thank you.
Happy to answer any questions you might have.
I just want to sort of reinforce the concept of the buoy and the monitoring, because it's twofold. One, we have, with Gary's direction, done a number of projects to catch stormwater runoff, which we have no idea what the impact has been on Lake Agawam. This will give us a baseline so that future projects, we can see the impact. The flip side of it is, on the poor side, we can see if the blue-green algae starts to bloom and the oxygen levels start dropping, we get a little forewarning before we have a major fish kill or other problems. Mm-hmm. So, to me, it's, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
It can help with funding, too.
I think that $5,000 is well spent.
We make a decision tonight.
Mm-hmm. I just want to know,
Well, I
after
think
we
we have
find
to
out
do-
all the bad things that are going on.
Council, I think, has to weigh in on that. There's a little more than just cutting a check.
That's such a good question, and I wish I had my wingman, Dr. Gobler, here tonight for that. He unfortunately was otherwise occupied. I'm not sure, Nancy, because there's so many different things. I think that one of the things we can all do, regardless of whether we water test or not, is to use less on our lawns. Less pesticides, less fertilizers, less irrigation, because you have to remember that everything we put on our lawns goes into the lowest spot available. So that being Lake Agawam for the village. But as far as going forward, that's a great question, and I don't want to speak out of turn on that. I know the aquatic harvester has been helpful in Georgica Pond, but they're also, as you've already done, the stormwater rebatement, that's made a tremendous difference. If we could hopefully get some of the lakefront homeowners also to update their septic systems, that would make a big difference as well. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and the low-hanging fruit would be what we do on our lawns.
So what's growing in the bottom of the lake right now? I was always under the impression that it was almost like eelgrass. What else is growing in there?
It wouldn't be eelgrass because eelgrass is salt water.
Yeah.
The same idea, though. Yeah. That's another good question. That's why I need Dr. Gobler.
And
I
was
know
also
their
under the
carp.
impression-
I know
There's
their
a lot of
carp.
carp. I don't think
Yeah.
there's much on the bottom.
As
Yeah, I don't
far
think
as-
there's that much on the bottom because from what I've been told, the carp have grown very large. They swish through everything, kill it all off as they're swishing through. So we don't really have a lot of plant growth.
Right. I
there.
wasn't saying that we necessarily would use that for Lake Agawam, but that was something that was appropriate for Georgica. Georgica is a whole different situation, though, because it's a brackish water
Yes.
body. It's like Mecox.
Right.
So, but I hope that sort of answered your question.
I'm just excited that you want to be involved in it.
Oh,
because-
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
No,
just
it's
think
great.
it's so important.
Yeah.
So, but did you have a question, Rich? I think
Well,
both you guys started at the same time.
Bill was, no, I was just touching base, kind of the Bill's made a statement about, let's do it tonight, but unfortunately, I do think the council has to weigh in, because it's an IMA.
Of
Obviously,
course.
it's not like when we had the private, it's not a public-private enterprise. You are a public entity, you're another governing board, so it's not just, let's go for it tonight, because now it's an IMA, it's where the money's going, who's, and so forth and so on. So, I mean, you know that answer, but I was just touching, because Bill was like, let's do it now. I'm like, needs a little more.
Love the enthusiasm.
Yes.
Right?
Usually the
Love
things
it.
that we've spent this month, that later on in the meeting, $5,000 is...
So the money's not,
doesn't
it's
buy you-
it's about the IMA.
Yeah.
It's not about the
Well,
money.
the-
I love the idea too, but
Now-
apparently it's not that
And one of
easy.
the interesting things to me, too, is that I don't think that Lake Agawam has a constant baseline. In other words, it just doesn't get worse as the summer goes on and it gets warmer. I think there are, as you sort of touch base on, other influential things that are affecting it. And one of the things that are affecting it is the use of pesticides and fertilizers on the surrounding homes. Now, that should be able to pick up the swing on the increase in the oxygen loads
Exactly.
at those times, so that we can actually chart that lake and say, well, here during the winter months, we got X, we get a big boost in
Temperature,
temperature
rainfall.
and rainfall, and then it drops off again. So, and that's very helpful on us. One of the one of the problems is that we do stormwater abatement, we do septic systems. You need an overall plan. You can't just be picking at these. We've been picking at stormwater because it's the easiest to do. As a municipality and with a highway department,
Sure.
we can take care of that issue.
And also, it's been necessary. I mean, you get flooding, so, and we know that's not going to get better, it's only going to get worse, so, yeah.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but the way I look at this is that it's a pilot project, it's a first step. And then we see, going forward, we see what we get as results here, and then maybe there's the potential to take the lens back a bit and take a bigger view. And as you said, Nancy, what's next. Because this gives us, the data gives us something to start with anyway, to be able to say, well, in July, when we had high temperatures, there were that's when the harmful algal bloom was through the roof. So that's
And
why I
you
think it's
mentioned
so
that there's more
important.
sophisticated telemetry buoys. Do you know the difference between this one and some of the more sophisticated ones that are at Georgica?
It's the number of parameters that are added. So we kept this very basic. Georgica, because it's a brackish, they have salinity. I believe they test for specifically nitrogen and phosphorus, whereas we did chlorophyll A, which chlorophyll A tests for the amount of plant growth in algae in water bodies. So it's an indicator of how much nutrients are coming in, or inputs into the water body. The thing that really bumps the price up, I think, and again, I think I may be speaking out of turn, I wish Dr. Gobler were here, is when it live streams. If you go to Friend of Georgica's website, you can see the parameters right there. You can see the differences in, just daily. Dissolved oxygen is lower at night, higher in the daytime. Salinity increases radically when the cut is opened. So you can see all of that. So there's a graph for it that's right there on that website. So those are the things. Dr. Gobler proposed a few more of those, and then we asked for it to be scaled off in the interests of sort of bare bones starting, so that it was palatable for both village, it was initially town trustees, but then hopefully with a partnership to be able to go forward. So it wasn't prohibitive.
So how much more would the more sophisticated,
Dr. Gobler's
It's a pretty big jump. I think.
initial proposal was about $20,000, so double. I don't recall the specific parameters, but I know that it was live stream, so it would be a live stream to, I don't know, I guess the village and the trustees' website. That could be something that we would look at going forward. If
Would the town partner up on that too as well?
trustees, we would have to talk to everybody about that. We're okay pretty much with the 5,000. I would love to say yes, but we have to see where that funding would come from.
So in East Hampton Town is currently using this. Are you guys using this yet? Anywhere?
In Mecox.
In Mecox.
Yes. Yeah. East Hampton Village in Georgica. Yeah, the town trustees are using it in a bunch of different spots. They started, I think, with one location, because Dr. Gobler tests for them as well. And I think at this point they have 12 or 15 locations that they're testing in all their different water bodies.
So Ann, I have a question for you. I know that recently we kind of did somewhat of a depth study, correct?
Well, it was, pretty amateur.
Yeah, Michael
depth
jumped in
study.
the water and see when he
I
got
think
done.
Gary rode around in a boat and somebody else stuck a stick in the ground. But
So there are some deep spots, that's my point. There are some deep spots out there.
Very too.
So where would this be placed? Because it would seem to me that if it were placed in the deeper water, it floats. Does it float in that? Okay, so then it doesn't matter. I was just thinking if it was in the deeper water, those currents underneath might be more fleshed out as opposed to the more shallow water.
I don't know where it would be placed. I'm not sure. I know that the depth of where it's placed is recorded, because I can see that when I'm looking at the live stream. I can see how much water it's in, but it's floating, but it's stationary.
Okay.
So it doesn't move. And that's a good question. I'm not sure, Nancy, how much. But remember that.
That would be important.
Right? Remember that with Lake Agawam, any currents would be wind-driven,
Yes.
right? So,
But that's I don't know how
Sure.
deep that would bring up from,
right, I'm not sure.
And the only question I had is, so much of Dr. Gobler's previous presentations to us have centered around runoff as well as nitrogen. So these three components that this would start testing, it's a great idea. And thank you for being a partner, and thank you for looking out for our water bodies, is what would it cost to include nitrogen?
I'll get back to you on that.
Because
That's-
that way, it might even help
Yeah.
in our quest as we are continuing to explore funding.
What we might want to do if we think that we're committing to a possible partnership is to have a small committee made up of a village board member or two, one or two trustees and Dr. Gobler, and we could kind of roundtable.
Flesh
Good
out
idea.
what exactly we'd want. Okay.
Good idea.
Thank you.
The same members that'll be here in another.
Yeah, right. Darn.
In the next,
I just
yeah.
want to, as you were so good to note, Mr. Hadrick, time is of the essence here, because I went and looked on New York State DEC's harmful algal blooms page. They haven't started testing yet for 2019. They usually start in May. Their data was all 2018. So we hope we could get this in as soon as
Soon as
possible, so that
possible.
we could get data that really is a baseline before our temperatures spike.
Well, I think we can move pretty quickly on it, so.
Thank you to all of you
you.
so much.
Thank you to the town trustees.
Yes, thank you.
Continuing on board presentations, we have Lake Agawam Buffer, Dan.
The board may notice that in their packet that there is a letter to the village from Nelson Pope and Voorhees, and also a letter in response to a letter that the village received from a resident regarding this project as well.
Back again.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, members of the board. First, thank you for the opportunity to come talk about this project once again. And on a completely unrelated note, but I couldn't resist from listening to the conversation on the prior speaker. One of my favorite sayings as a planner is that which is measured can be managed. And if you don't have good information, if you don't have good data, it's hard to manage a resource. So I would urge you, as a planner who's been working on these issues for almost 30 years now, to the degree you can, within budgetary resources, gather more data, gather more good science, it will only improve your efficiency and effectiveness in making decisions down the road. Unsolicited, but I couldn't help. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this project, the Lake Agawam Restoration Plan. We talked about it a good deal at the last meeting, so I'm going to be brief. In broad concepts, what we are proposing is a partnership, a public-private partnership between a group of residents surrounding Lake Agawam and the village to eradicate some of the invasive species along approximately 250 yards of the southeastern portion of the lake, and then to replace that with native species, non-fertilizer dependent species along that portion of the lake. The purpose is to increase the amount of pollution absorption, both from stormwater runoff as well as from groundwater. This project has something of a history to it. Julie is painfully aware of a good deal of that history from taking all of my phone calls. And I want to say at the outset that we are incredibly thankful as a group for the patience and the interest and the consideration that the trustees have provided as we've moved through this process. We know it's been challenging at times. We know there's, a set of competing interests that we've tried to balance, but we are very grateful for the interest and the sincerity of the boards that working with us to try to resolve these issues and to result in a project that meets your needs, that addresses our concerns, and that is a betterment, most importantly, is an improvement for village residents. This started as a couple homeowners concerned about the lake, concerned about the Phragmites and the maintenance of those Phragmites on the southeastern portion of the lake. It has evolved from a couple of homeowners to now we have 77, nearly 80 residents who have signed a petition in support of the project. We have 10 residents and organizations who have written personal letters of support, including the Lake Agawam Conservation Association and the Southampton Association. So we've gone from a fairly small kind of group of residents who are interested and said, what can we do, to a broad-based support led by a team of professionals. And present company excluded. It's been an honor to work with some of those people. Hollander Design Landscape Architects has helped and worked in partnership with Peconic Environmental Associates to develop what we think is a first-class plan, a plan that really helps to improve the mitigation along the lake and to better protect both public health and environmental quality moving forward. We've also benefited from the advice of Dr. Gobler, who seems to be referenced on every water quality discussion on the island, but he's that important, I think, to the discussion. He looked at all the plans that were prepared. He has volunteered his time in response to our request and has made recommendations that have resulted in the plan that you have presented before you here this evening. In terms of materials that you have the latest plan, which you've seen previously. You have the latest renderings, which, again, my era, you've actually seen these renderings previously. Dr. Goldel presented them during his presentation here about a month ago. I inadvertently sent not the most recent renderings in one of the previous mailings. I apologize for that. That was my error. However, you've had those renderings as part of Dr. Goldel's presentation.
Which one are we focusing on? I got an L40 and I got an L4.1.
Those are the renderings that I'm referencing right now. The plan, exactly. And those are the most recent renderings. I've talked about the kind of broad parameters of the project team, and the history of its development. I want to make clear also there's been different public comments about what was the intent of this project, and I want to make clear that the team mandated and compelled the property owners that are working with us to consider multiple factors in designing a plan. While the maintenance and protection of view sheds was one factor, the team also required that the design take into consideration access, maintenance, environmental quality, and public health in addition to the view shed. It has not been an easy process, as you are fully aware. We've tried to do our best to balance that process, to balance these competing interests in a way that maintains and actually enhances the current view shed from existing conditions. And again, some of the information you have before you, in addition to the cost estimates, the renderings, the plan, are also some slides that Dr. Goldberg provided that show what the Phragmites has looked like in recent years, which provided absolutely no view of that portion of the lake. What we've tried to do is to lower the plantings beyond what currently exists, beyond what has recently existed, to enhance that view. Again, we can all kind of agree to disagree in terms of whether we struck in the right balance, but we've done our absolute best to try to, again, address the concerns that we've heard from you and from community members to do just that. According to Dr. Gobler, and I don't want to get involved in the science, but he specifically indicated that this most recent plan increases the amount of nutrient absorption or pollutant absorption by 3 to 4 times over the previous plans that were submitted and over existing conditions. So we think that's an added benefit. Most importantly, we think that this project, proposed as a public-private partnership, also provides several benefits to the village and to its residents. Specifically, it allows the village to enhance its efforts to protect water quality. You've noted previously on both tonight and on prior evenings the efforts that you've gone through to protect water quality in this village, which is probably the most significant regional concern right now facing governments throughout Suffolk County. So you've done additional drainage structures, you've considered rain gardens, you've preserved open space and taken development off the table in close proximity to this, in partnership with residents, I might add. And I think this is another project that adds to that comprehensive approach to mitigate the impacts that have resulted in the impairment of the lake. It also is, I think, an opportunity, an important opportunity to engage residents in this process. As the village leads in terms of these water quality efforts and engages citizens in a meaningful way in this process, I think it adds to the education of residents. So again, there was concern over the use of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizer. Those are absolutely legitimate concerns. The residents that I've worked with have, I think, expressed a firm commitment to work in partnership with you to make sure that we address those concerns moving forward. No one around the lake that I've met, no one in Suffolk County that I've spoken to as a resident is interested in polluting groundwater or surface water. I think most of what happens is done through a lack of knowledge. I think that knowledge base has increased dramatically due to the efforts of people like Dr. Gobler in recent years, but we need to continue that dialogue. A public-private partnership like this, I think, gives you an opportunity to continue that dialogue, to get people really vested in this process. And if they're investing private funds in order to improve public properties, in order to better protect public health and environmental quality, I think they're going to be more vested in doing what they can do on their own properties to also add to that effort. I know of individual residents that have already invested more than $100,000 in providing buffers on their own property in order to mitigate these types of impacts. And I think you get more buy-in from that with a sense of partnership between the community and, again, you as trustees. It also helps to reduce, obviously, the cost on taxpayers and provide, I think, most importantly, this type of a partnership is going to be increasingly needed by governments of all sizes as it combats what's going to be an incredibly costly and regionally broad solution, set of problems. You know, climate-driven change is only making the situation of water quality declines even worse. So we can't expect these problems to get better on their own. They're going to take effort. It's going to take not only a Herculean effort from government, but I think it's going to take government engaging with residents to better address these issues, to go above and beyond what government can do based upon its own resources. So I apologize if I've gone on too long. I hope I've addressed your concerns. I'm available if you have any questions. Again, we're begging and imploring you for support. We know we have a lot of work to do in terms of an agreement, provided you're content or satisfied with the design of the plan. I'd like to thank the village attorney for sitting down with me for a considerable period of time on a very hectic day for him to work through some of those issues. I think based upon that conversation, I know we have more work to do, but I'm absolutely confident that we can resolve those issues and come up with an agreement that works for the village as well as works for us in terms of the residents. What we would respectfully ask you to do is if you could, again, I recognize the concern with conditional approvals, but I think in light of the history and the good faith effort that we've exhibited over the last 4 years to try to get to this point, we're hoping that you can see your way through to a conditional approval of the plan, subject to the execution of agreements to the complete satisfaction of the village trustees and the village attorney. We're confident we can get there. We just need, I think at this point, a sign of good faith that the village is actually comfortable with this approach, comfortable with the plan, is willing to work through the kind of nuts and bolts of the details to hammer out an agreement. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. And thank you, everybody that is on your behalf that has been contributing to this, because it's been a significant number of plans that we've been handed. Now, have these changed? Because these are our current dates that are...
They're both the same date.
Right, but they're 516. The ones that...
They're 516, but one is an L 4.10.
Well, one's the construction and one is
Right.
the restoration.
One is a construction management plan, one is the actual
Both restorations.
plan.
But they're two different numbers, but they're both done on 5/16/19.
They're both the same plan. One is a construction management plan, which we were
Yeah.
requested to submit. And one is the actual plan itself, site plan, if you will.
So then, and, you know, in lieu of that, I think and I will defer to the other trustees, but I think it's difficult to give you affirmative action right now because we only received these today. And, you know, I know there are some small changes, but we need to go through it. And the previous one we sent out for review, and these should be sent out for review.
previous plan was actually submitted in time for Professor Goldbler's presentation. So you've had these plans since that time period. We resubmitted them, so you had hard copies of those plans just as one complete package.
Right,
But the plan has not changed since Dr. Goldbler presented it about a month ago. The renderings haven't changed since he presented it about a month ago as well. So that PowerPoint presentation is identical to the plans that you see before you. And the only substantive change in terms of the renderings is we showed the increased number of trees were put in clumps or clusters in order to maximize the pollutant absorption and minimize the impact to view. So instead of one tree in a location, there are 3 trees clustered. They're called service berries. And they're so noted on the plan. But that's the only actual substantive change to rendering those plans.
And you gave the board, all board members copies of the projected cost of the
Yes.
construction removal?
Yes.
Did everybody look at that? Numbers for the removal of the concrete and such?
If I could speak to that just for a very quick moment, and I've mentioned it to most of you, but that construction estimate for the excavation work and the bringing in of the fill is a very conservative estimate. The factors that will determine the actual cost, which we anticipate being lower than that conservative estimate, is the trucking costs, the disposal costs, the cost of the new fill, and the actual excavation work. The disposal costs we listed as $100,000 based upon our discussions with the excavating company. That could change dramatically and be significantly lower if we can find a more affordable place to dispose of the material. We're still working on that. That's a worst-case scenario in our minds, so we're hopeful that, even potentially in partnership with the town of Southampton, that we could somehow find a location that's more affordable. That's just, again, to stress, it's $350,000 total. It's a very conservative estimate, Mark. Fine. We didn't want to give you a number that ended up being actually higher once we did the details.
I have not seen the proposal of
That
them.
was, excuse me, that was that came, I believe, yesterday.
I think it's probably in your mailbox.
Boxes with the other renderings that was prior
So the
to
350 is
this
for
render.
It's for the excavation work,
going in and removing the concrete?
going in,
all of the-
digging up the fill and the phragmites and the rubble that's in that area where the phragmites are located.
But there's actually some costs that aren't in there because you're going to have to de-water the cement. You're going to have to de-water what you dig out.
Well, you have to dry out the material, but that's
Right.
part of that disposal cost that we're estimating, the $100,000 for the disposal cost. The second component of that cost is trucking. The third component is the actual disposal cost. Excavation, trucking, disposal, and then finally the bringing in of new fill, the cost of that fill. Those are the 4 components of that
And
cost.
you think that's going to cost 350?
We think that's a worst-case scenario, yes.
Julie's getting the things that are in the box, or
Yes.
boxes.
And that's a proposal that you are interested in paying for, or that's the total cost?
Sure. Just to rehash what we discussed last time, originally we were going to pay for the entire cost of the project, except for a $70,000 contribution from the village, which was your estimated cost for the original project. So we were covering the entire cost except for $70,000. And we've estimated the cost to be about a $300,000 project in terms of plantings and grading and maintenance. We've also,
What was the 70,000 for? Just
that was the estimate of the village-sponsored project, original cost of that, and that would be the village's contribution to this public-private partnership. There was then a request made that we eliminate the use of any chemicals in conjunction with this work. We had originally proposed hand wicking of the Phragmites and the knotweed. Hand wicking is permitted by the DEC, but we recognize the concerns over the use of any chemicals in conjunction with a water body that's already impaired. So we said we'll redesign the project and see what that results in terms of costs. But that was a cost that we couldn't fully absorb. So what we asked the village to do as part of this public-private partnership was to then increase its commitment, its contribution on the project to include the excavation work. We would continue to do all the plantings, all the maintenance, all the irrigation of the project moving forward. In terms of maintenance, again, we've discussed different numbers. I'm comfortable that we originally proposed 3 years of maintenance. We're willing to consider up to 5 years of maintenance and a possibility to extend that out further. Again, if you're happy with the work and you're happy with the project.
So total estimated cost prior to maintenance is $650.
About $650,000. And we're still adding up all of our soft costs in terms of our contribution.
Yes.
But yes, in terms of plantings alone and the excavation work, yes. And that doesn't include all the maintenance work either.
No, right,
Right.
just the project.
Right.
So which ones are we,
So those plans were sent yesterday, but those are now replaced by the new renderings that you've gotten,
Which ones?
received today,
The renderings that we received today,
which are
which one?
the
big
larger
ones?
ones. The other ones are dated 5/13/18
those are the old ones. You can
and
discard those.
4/23/18. So those are
Mind me
no
asking
longer
what's the difference?
applicable.
11 by 7. The difference, the only substantive difference you'll see in there is that where there's one tree indicated in the older renderings on some of the images, you'll see 3 trees clustered, service berries clustered. That's the only difference in terms of the elevations, the renderings.
So this is an estimate of just the
Excavation.
startup, tearing it down.
That's the excavation work, the disposal of the material, the trucking, both of the material disposed and the new material coming on the site, and the cost of the new material.
So you
Those
originally
four
thought it was going to be $300,000 for the plantings and putting it in. So 300, which you always prepared to do.
Yes.
So now we're projecting here, the cleanup part is 350.
Worst case scenario, again.
Worst case, get that.
Right.
So,
This is the
and this
alternative.
is, well, no, this has to be done first. There's no alternative. This
Right,
has to be done
but
first.
this came about because the original plan had wicking, which meant we have pesticides, not just
Gotcha.
in 1 year, but over multiple years. So,
Right. And so this is the villages tab, is that what we're saying? Or
Yes.
So we're talking about a $600,000 job, of which we're splitting in half.
Right.
300 for you guys to plant, 300 for us, meaning the village, to clean.
Rough numbers,
And
correct.
prepare. Rough, I get
Again,
it.
our numbers are probably going to increase as we're eliminating the use of any chemicals. The amount of maintenance we're going to do in order to maintain the plantings and to fully eradicate the knotweed if it should come back is going to increase our costs. But just, again, that's rough
No,
numbers,
I
yes.
appreciate you getting these numbers, because that's what we discussed. And I appreciate getting these numbers in short time. Are these numbers that you agree with, Mr. DPW? Oh, okay.
Do you want
I haven't seen any of this yet.
to, want me to pass it over?
And that's using an outside contractor, I think. Yeah.
Correct.
How do we know the...
Gary, you got to come up. Sorry.
You know the rules.
Gary Gillespie, Superintendent of Public Works. How do we know the scope of the removal at this point? Have we gone out there and tested the distance of the concrete out from the shore, what's in the shore, to come up with the volume of this? Or are we just going to do the concrete in the area of planting, and any other concrete we're just going to leave?
Sure.
Stay close.
We did an inspection of the location with Conic Environmental Associates and Barry Excavating Company, who has, from what I understand, a very good history and a lot of experience in these types of projects. So they actually went out there and inspected the site and estimated these costs based upon that inspection. And our goal was to fully eradicate the Phragmites and the Japanese knotweed, which again are two particularly aggressive invasive species. So whatever was needed to be excavated to accomplish that was the goal of the excavation and of the excavation work. So it's not looking to excavate to the roadway to remove all the material that's there. We're looking to remove the invasive material. And if there is rubble or debris that exists within that area, then we're going to pull that out as well, because you can't remove it otherwise unless you want to use chemicals, and we don't want to use chemicals.
So I have to tell you that one of the things that disturbs me is that in the letter that Dr. Gobler sent on May 21st, there's a paragraph here that talks about, my prior studies of Lake Agawam for the village have found that on-site septic systems and are delivering, my prior studies of Lake Agawam for the village have found that 80% of the nitrogen entering Lake Agawam is derived from on-site wastewater and fertilizers, and that the two major pathways for delivering nitrogen are via surface runoff and groundwater flow. 80%, which means all those houses that are around that lake are delivering all of that into the lake. And this project, okay, he talks about this project is the estimate representing close to 8%. The plan submitted by Ed Hollander indicates the length of shoreline, in fact, 250 yards, of 2.5 times greater than he's referring to Rob Coburn's letter or something, estimate, and therefore representing close to 8%, not 3% of shoreline. 8% of the shoreline when we have 80% of nitrogen entering into the lake from everywhere else. It would seem to me that if we really wanted to clean up this lake, everyone has to get on board here. Not just this planting project that is a small little part of the lake is going to do nothing if everybody else doesn't participate.
Sure. I think that letter also goes on to talk about how this is an important part of comprehensive strategy to mitigate the impacts of the...
But it's not going to do anything unless everybody else comes on, works on it too.
Again, I don't think he's characterized it as not doing anything. He said
No, I'm not saying it's not going to do anything.
It's an important part of an overall strategy. And just to be clear, the contributing area to the lake is much larger than the shorefront property owners. The watershed for Lake Agawam is much broader and involves many more properties than just the homeowners that are directly adjacent to it. One of the benefits of those actual homeowners that are directly adjacent to it is they're actually the largest lots, so they represent some of the lowest density that contributes to the lake. That's a benefit. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't also take steps to make sure that we minimize the impact of fertilizer, pesticides, and herbicides. Absolutely. But it's important to understand that the lake is in the condition it's in for a host of problems. There's no one silver bullet. We've never claimed that this is a silver bullet to improving the lake, but we think this is an important piece of an overall puzzle to help restore the lake back to a condition where it's in a much more environmentally beneficial condition. It's not going to happen overnight. I think it's going to take multiple projects, but I think this is a nice opportunity for the village to partner and to bring private sector money to bear on this project. If the village wanted to go forward with its own project and it wanted to eliminate the use of chemicals as it has requested us to do, it's still going to be a double the cost of what you're contributing right now. So you're cutting the project cost in half through this partnership. And I think, which I think is critically important, it's going to lead to additional opportunities down the road, which is only going to help in terms of village budgets, and it's a comprehensive approach to addressing this problem. It's going to require partnerships. I think as frustrating as this has been for all concerned, and I think there's been frustrations on our part, and I'm sure there's been frustrations on your part, not to mention Julie again, alone, who's been frustrated by this. But this is the right model, I think, moving forward. And we're confident this is a model that can be replicated to the benefit of the village moving forward. And that's why we think it's worth the effort of fighting for these 4 years to get this done.
But Dan, I think it's well worth it, project. But my hesitation is the newer submitted plans are dated 5/16, and they haven't been reviewed, and I would be really hesitant to vote on something that hasn't gone through the same procedure that we've done with the other plans that you've submitted us.
Sure. Just, again, to be clear for the record, and I want to be perfectly clear on the record, the change to the plan that you see from the time of Dr. Gobler's presentation was simply a note on the plan to eliminate the use of herbicides or chemicals of any kind and to excavate the material. It's done as a note. The actual design of the plan is identical to what was presented more than a month ago by Dr. Gobler. And I also want to stress that even if you were to move forward with the plan tonight, which we hope you do, it's still subject to the execution of an agreement to your satisfaction, to the satisfaction of the village attorney. If we can't reach an agreement by the time of the next meeting, you could even word the approval should be deemed null and void. There are conditional approvals used all the time. In an ideal world, we'd like to have everything done and tied up. Unfortunately, this isn't an ideal world, and it hasn't been a perfect process. So we're, again, just looking, beseeching you for some consideration of the effort that we've put into this point, that you can at least give us some assurance that this is the plan that you're comfortable with proceeding in. And again, if you're not comfortable with the agreement, with the financial details, with the responsibilities, with the insurance requirements, whatever is needed to satisfy the requirements of the village attorney, then it doesn't move forward. And if you're not, and we fully recognize also, and again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but partnerships like this work when both parties are happy. We fully recognize that. We want you to be happy with this project. We're not going to take any steps that are going to alienate the ultimate completion of this project to your satisfaction. We want to do that. It's not going to work otherwise. And we don't want to make the investment, quite honestly, if 5 years from now or 10 years from now you decide you don't like the project and you cut it down.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Because I think I've said it many times, certainly two won't be here if they knew it was about the rest of us. But yeah, down the road, that's just it. The people you're representing understand that it is a donation, a very generous one in time and resources. But that doesn't give them, they're not buying the land, they have no extra ownership or stake or anything to that land. And as such, if that is the case, another board or a different variation of what's here in 5 years or what have you, decide just that, you know what, I don't like it anymore, and want to do just that, cut it down, you realize as the 5 people, whoever they may be, representing the village residents, have that absolute right to do that, unless you're saying there's going to be some wording in there precluding any future board from doing it, or the existing one for that matter. I mean, that's what I said from the get-go. Like, if I don't, that's why quite honestly, I don't have a problem going ahead with any part of this, because I said kind of tongue-in-cheek, if I don't like it, or somebody up here doesn't like it down the road, it's owned by the village. I'll send a DPW over to cut it down, or trim it, or what have you. That's what makes it palatable to me.
They understand fully and explicitly that the only rights they have are the rights that you provide to them through any agreement that we're able to execute.
Okay. Well, that's where the devil is.
And that's why we understand that it's in our best interests that you're happy.
To embark on something. I get what you're saying.
I've gone to the extent of I actually reached out to Betsy Barlow Rogers, who founded the Central Park Conservancy, spoke with her this weekend. She's a Waynescott resident who's actually aware of water quality issues in the region, to discuss with her how that Central Park Conservancy agreement evolved over time, how they handled the relationship in terms of doing work on city property. And I'm meeting with her at the end of this month to kind of better flesh out those details. So we understand. We're very acutely aware of
I'm behind you 100%.
that concern.
I told you in this meeting and in this room, and I've told you privately that private public is a great way to go about it. I have no problem with it. I have no problem with the money behind it. The so forth can be worked out. I am tired of talking about it. I do want something to happen and go forward. So I think one of the biggest things is this right here. 300,000.
Sure.
This is one question that came up, which I appreciate you digging that up. This is a big question. I think we have to decide, are we putting up 300K, but obviously you point out something that's valid as well. If we're going to do something, this cost is happening.
If you're happy with the plan, and then we can't come to an agreement in terms of the cost sharing, or you decide that, you know what, we can't come up with that type of money, then it doesn't work.
Wayne, I have a question for you. I mean, when we voted that one of the things that we were requesting was that we would maintain a view there. Is that correct?
I don't believe you voted. You polled the board in the past. That was a year ago, and that was the directive that you did give to the zoning board, and they conditioned it as part of their wetland permit back in February 2018, approximately, I believe it was. And that's what your consultant responded to, was, is this plan consistent with what this board looked at and the zoning board granted as a wetland permit or not? you did get a memo in response to that. If Dan is saying that's the same plan, you have that issue still an issue. And
Still
I
have the
think
issue.
ultimately that has been the issue, the stumbling block on this plan. It's not about the environment, it's not about the plants. I think everybody, this entire board, has been consistent on that. So that's not the question. The issue is this is public property. There's a certain view shed that historically has been there, and whether you're going to maintain that in some form or fashion has been one of the issues this board is and the landowners have all been grappling with. That being said, the other issues that have come and gone in this plan in various versions is whether or not your plan is going to proceed with the removal, the debris that was put there to shore up the road or not. And there's been difference of opinions of how and what that would be to the survivability and whatnot. And always in the past, I think the last plan a year ago didn't include the removal of rock. So that's another issue, which I'm glad we have one of our town trustees here, is at some point that, once you get into the bottom of this, in the lake bottom, that is the town trustees' land. So there may be a component we need to partner with them and find out is that going to work and how that happens. But I think Rich pointed out is you got $350,000, which I haven't heard that discussion before. I mean, I've heard about the removal, but who and when and where and who's going to pay for it wasn't something I've heard you discuss and debate.
Well, I think that's important, but I think in Chick's letter to us, he's talking about, would be expected to meet a maximum growth height shorter than 5 feet. And then he's pointing out that the species that are on this plan have the potential to grow to 6 to 12 feet for the shrubs, and that up to 20 feet for the trees. The trees I'm not as worried about because you can trim them up, but the shrubs at 6 to 12 feet, I'm concerned about that because I don't see any view of the lake with a 6 to 12-foot shrub. And that's my concern.
Sure. No, and we understand that concern. We also very specifically spoke to our landscape architect about that concern. There's also a note on the plan that very specifically indicates, based upon the growing conditions in this area, which are much less than ideal, they do not believe, in their professional opinion, again, Ed Hollander has 30 years of experience in this area, that we're talking about anything close to maximum growing height based upon the growing conditions here.
When I look at what was given to us today on pictures, what I see here is the lake through the Phragmite, which is not that pretty, and what I see here is no view of the lake.
Right.
I see pretty flowers, but I see no view of the lake. What I see here is a glimpse of the lake. I see no glimpse of the lake here. I see the lake through the Phragmite here. I see no view of the lake here.
Sure.
And it continues, and it continues, and here I see a view through the Phragmite of the lake, and I don't like the Phragmite, and I think it's bad for the lake, but here I see no view of the lake.
Sure.
That's my concern.
And I understand that concern, but I just think it's also important to point out that the reason why you can see through those Phragmites today is because those Phragmites for the last several years have been cut back little by little over time. The reason I got involved in this project originally, more than 4 years ago, was because there were calls from residents about the cutting back of the Phragmites for maintenance purposes. So one of the reasons, and you have also slides from Dr. Goldberg's presentation that show the Phragmites in a much more healthy and robust state going back maybe 3 or 4 years ago. The reason why they're in the condition they're in today is because they have been consistently cut back, and that's why you can see. Again, one of the repercussions of that is also then decrease the ability of those Phragmites to filter pollutants, increasing the load to the lake. That was one of our concerns. Dr. Goldberg actually indicated that it's possible that cutting back of the Phragmites is one of the reasons why the blue-green algae was the most intense and the most significant it's ever been in the 15 years he studied it last summer, because there's less vegetation absorbing some of it. Is that the only reason? No. But is it a factor in that reason? Based upon his professional opinion, he thought it might be. So again, We understand, in a perfect world, I'm a planner. I spent my years, 30 years, defending the public, trying to advocate for greater access for the public to shorefront lands, to open spaces, to public parkland. I'm as sincere in that interest as you are, I'm sure. But one of the things we've tried to do is to balance a very delicate series of competing interests. We've tried to maximize the viewshed, but also maximizing the benefit in terms of water pollution protection and public health protection, while maintaining consistent access around the lake, not interfering with that at all, and at the same time reducing the amount of maintenance that's ultimately long-term going to be involved with the lake. So in terms of those 5 factors, we think we're reducing maintenance costs, we're maintaining the access that exists today, which was requested of us, we're improving public health and environmental quality, and we think we're actually enhancing the viewshed from the current conditions. I agree with you 100%. In a perfect world with no water quality impairment, it'd be nice to level everything there. I'm with you. We don't have those conditions today. We have actually a public health threat. And just to remind the board, blue-green algae is a problem across the country. New York State keeps records on it. Lake Agawam is the most heavily impacted lake in New York State, in the 62 counties in New York State, out of any other surface water body. So we're not talking about a minor problem at this point. Again, blue-green algae is potentially a threat to public health. Not just the fish, just the environmental conditions, but the public health. And that's why we tried to strike a balance that maximized that benefit. I wish we could come, and I'd rather present a plan that provided exactly the viewshed that you want. But unfortunately, in balancing these competing interests, this is the bargain that we think we've struck.
Okay.
Wants to say something.
Actually, yeah, you can speak, because I wanted to ask you, what is there? What's all this concrete? What is there?
Well, there is plenty of concrete. Essentially, over the years in the past, when the village had extra concrete sidewalk and curb to shore up Pond Lane, to shore up Gin Lane, it was put there because those areas would flood out.
Back in the 80s?
No, even the 60s you're talking, probably. But the idea that taking out an existing buffer, as ugly as it is, and replacing it with another buffer is going to clean up that lake is ludicrous. Okay? There's not a lot of water that goes in there. You basically have the road, and you have the spill off from one side of the road. This is a beautification project. I would love to see the Phragmites gone too. There's no reason we couldn't do that as a low planting. Chick Voorhees and I continue to come out in opposition to this plan because we do not want to give away that public view. Private money is wonderful. It's a lot of money. But it's kind of like we're selling away that view that everybody else gets. And we don't want that. We can put lower plantings in there, and we can do the same thing. A few meetings ago when Chick Voorhees was up here, and I think Mackie Finnerty and some other people were talking about this, she tried to ask him, what would this do to the lake? How much would this clean the lake? And I think the answer came back as a fraction of a percent. I don't know if you all remember that. And so we continue to...
So the village is supposed to contribute $300,000 for a fraction of an improvement to the lake when everyone else around the lake is putting fertilizers all over their property.
Well, I think what's important to know is the village, if we were going to do, this all began with you proposing to do something. So it was going to cost the village something. Is this what you had in mind, this number?
No, we were not talking about disturbing the concrete at all.
You weren't.
Everything that was there
you were going to leave it as
there.
And why would you have done that, and why does his group recommend it?
Well, we were going with a different method. Our method was, the cut and kill, and that was Chick Voorhees' plan that he told to me that it kind of works, that after you're mowing things for 3 or 4 years, all this invasive kind of stops. And we were down on the site recently because we've applied for another grant for Gin Lane in that area. And we've noticed that the areas that we have cut in the last several years, that is, all the agitation down there, all those weeds are gone. The turf outcompeted the knotweed and the Phragmite. So his idea of essentially going in there, clear-cutting the whole thing, filling in where needed, because there's rocks in there, the concrete, leveling it, and keep mowing that as turf would eliminate all that without having to rip everything out. The only thing being there is you would have a bare shore that you would have to put shrubs in.
Does the town trustee representative have any input on removing that stuff or leaving it? not to put you on the spot here, but, 'cause
So Gary, if we were to go in there and clean cut, as you say, all of that now, at that point, and then a planting plan were to go in there, some planting plan that we all agree on, how can you continue to clean cut if there are plants planted? How would you be able to get around that if Phragmites starts to come back and take over?
We could only do a partial planting, and when we talked about this over a year ago, we would do a sporadic planting. It would be just, every 30 feet or so, there would just be something that we would continue to mow around. Because the other opposition that Chick originally brought forward here was if the whole planting plan is done and then you have to come in between, at the time they were talking about wicking, it's going to be very hard. You'd be trampling on all your plants as you go in there and try to either pull this stuff out or try to kill it by hand.
so you're proposing a cost-effective way of doing it bit by bit by bit, whereas they're saying, do it in one shot, get it done, do it right, and
I
invest in the
guess-
beginning. Or do it right, it's a relative, but invest it and get it done.
In a perfect world, getting rid of all the concrete sounds great. I wouldn't mind it either. But they build reefs out of concrete. So that concrete is fairly inert where
So
it
that might not
sits
be
as far as we
necessary.
know.
We might not, this number may be substantially less. We might not have to remove.
Well, that's the thing. If the Phragmites now is 20 to 30 feet out into the water, are we going to the bottom of the lake? Are we clearing all that out too? That's why I was kind of wondering what that was. And is that a prevailing wage rate as well? Is that covered?
Does Chick's plan contemplate wicking?
Originally, we did talk about wicking, but because Chick's plan was the village plan, we can amend that in any way we want.
So how do you get around wicking?
You would just clear cut. You would just keep mowing and mowing and mowing.
So how do you mow if the Phragmites goes out into the water?
Out there, you go out there and you cut it below the water's surface. And after several times of cutting, it can't compete and come back up.
So we've cut the Phragmites already multiple times. And how much of that Phragmites has now been destroyed?
In areas that we've kept cut, 90% of it's gone. In the areas that we've cut every 5 years, it comes back.
Because that Phragmites, if you go and look at it, is pretty thick and runs that entire length.
But we've never been able to cut it down to the edge of the water, because what's happened through the years is that was all a very rubbled shore. About a year ago, we went in, we brought clean sand in there, and we tried to level all that out so we could maintain that. We were trying to keep a wide shoulder for visibility, safety for the road. And we've been doing that. And in that area, that Phragmite and that knotweed is gone.
The other piece that's conflicting, because I think we've had a lot of conflicting information, is that the runoff is only going to intensify. And with increased development in that area, we're going to have not only above-ground runoff from all the cars and additional traffic, but below-ground runoff. So the shrubbery plan that Chick's plan put forward, those shrubs only intercept mostly up an above-ground portion, not a below-ground.
Chick has told me that the subsurface water there flows south. It does not flow to the lake. Okay, so that's one part of that. But the surface water that does go there is basically coming from the center of the Gin Lane all the way down to that edge. So you're talking about 30 feet over that run of 800 feet. And that's water. It goes in. That's something. But recently, the mayor's allowed us to apply for a grant on Gin Lane, which includes retention ponds, rain gardens, very environmentally friendly things that we could get grants to pay about 50% of, and then we could apply for other grants to pay for the other 50%. That would control that stormwater much better than letting it get anywhere near the lake. Because if you get a deluge, it doesn't matter what you plant there, it's running right through it.
If we reach a point where we actually have to dredge the lake, what happens with the concrete?
Concrete there, we would be going out a lot further where the dredging is. It seems like the solids of the sand are coming right from the outflow pipe. That's what you're seeing there. Not so concerned about that. It's the other matter that goes out a little bit further. We're nicknaming it muck. But what Mike mentioned earlier is the Parks Department went out to the Gin Lane outfall, and we went to the northern outfall of the lake. And as we got out about 75, 85 feet, we started getting into 7 to 10 feet of muck. And again, Chris Goldberg, we like to talk about him because he's the guy He said at the meeting the best bang for the buck was dredging that lake. So I've also talked to Mike, and we're trying to get a consensus of the town trustees. I reached out to Ed Warner, and we would like to talk to a lot of government people to come in and see, can we go to every outfall pipe in that lake and clean around there first and see what we get? Because if we've got 7 to 10 feet of just protein, nitrogen, whatever you want to call it, just sitting there, any buffers we do is not going to make a difference, not a great difference. It's going to be a beautification project, which I would love to see, but let's not give up the public view.
What's the chances of the governor just wrote the town a check for Good Ground Park in Hampton Bay, so this has been stated that this is the worst body of water in the entire state of New York. I would imagine that should draw the attention of somebody in Albany, no?
I think it's a very good chance. We had about a year ago, we had about 6 people from the DEC came out by the governor's order. Mike and I sat down, Nancy, I believe you were there.
Yeah.
And they said, we want to help Lake Agawam. Well, we didn't get too far with that. We were promised some funds that didn't quite show up, but the governor did show interest. And I think we could go to the governor, we can go to the county, we can go to the federal level, and dredging is really the way to go here. Buffers, IA systems, everything, all helps. But I don't think that's your lion's share. So let's not sell the public view away. What we've been telling people is over the last year and a half or so, let's compromise. Let's block areas where it'll really affect some homeowners, and then let's have some low areas too. There's got to be a way to compromise this thing.
Thank you, Gary.
If I could just make a couple comments. I worked in government for over 20 years, 25 years actually. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the challenges in government. It's not an easy job. It's never my intent to be adversarial in my approach with government because I understand how difficult it is. But I do have to push back a little bit in terms of mischaracterizing the project as a beautification project. I wouldn't be involved in the project on a personal level if it was a beautification project alone. We brought Dr. Gobler on board specifically to address the water quality analysis associated with the project. It was his professional opinion that this project would provide 3 to 4 times the protection of the prior plan offered by the village. And again, I want to stress, because it's important in terms of the property history. Originally, this started as a maintenance project for the village. I was called out when the backhoe was out on the property clearing the Phragmite into the water line. There was no plan in place. There were no permits from a wetlands permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. There was no plan developed. There were no approvals whatsoever. It was as a result of the dialogue that we entered into with the previous administration that a plan was ultimately developed because we contacted the DEC just to find out what the rules were. And the DEC made it clear that A, a permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, a wetlands permit, is required by the village to do activity within a designated wetlands, which this location is. And B, the plan proposed by the village has to be at least as protective, if not more protective than the existing conditions. One of Dr. Gobler's principal concerns with the village plan, again, was a period of 3 years of clearing, denuding the vegetation, consistently cutting back everything that's currently growing there in order to suppress it and allow turf to vegetate, to take over. That's 3 years of unmitigated stormwater runoff to a lake that's already one of the most impaired water bodies in the state. We put together a plan that, again, we think properly balances public health, environmental quality, the view sheds, access and maintenance, all of those factors. It is categorically not true to simply characterize this as a beautification project. Again, I respectfully make those comments. I have nothing but respect for the work that employees do within the village, but this is not simply a beautification project. We wouldn't be here 4 years later if that's what it was.
It's a nice byproduct.
No one disagrees that it's important to maintain a view shed and to make sure that residents are happy with the design. We think it enhances the design from current conditions. We can agree to disagree about that. I'm fine. Just don't mischaracterize the work as simply a beautification project that could be done cheaper with the use of chemicals, and it'd be better in that direction, because we think eliminating the chemicals is a step in the right direction. We think maintaining vegetation throughout the period without 3 years of no growth is a better approach to mitigating the harm to the lake. Thank you again. I don't want to belabor the point, but thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. So, I'm not sure how the trustees want to proceed. My concern, again, is that this is an updated plan. The original plan, Nelson Pope and Voorhees had sent us a note that the original plan failed in Category 1 on providing view sheds. I think personally that this plan needs to go for review also.
We have a lot to talk about because there's much more of a cost here for the village. And also, I think this is a letter from Chick Voorhees, but maybe we should be getting together with him to go over all of this. I don't think we can move forward on this in any way other than...
So what are we looking to do? Where are we going from here?
I think Dan is looking for a resolution accepting the plan.
We can't accept this plan.
Right, so you don't want to do that yet. So what's the next best? So then when we go, we're not going to do that, then what do we do to get this moving along?
We get it moving along. This plan goes back to Nelson Pope and Voorhees, this new updated plan, and he'll do a report, as he did similar in there, on it. And that's contingent upon getting a wetlands permit,
I think
which is what we discussed earlier, too.
Yeah, just so the public knows, he made a recommendation on the plan of April 24th.
Well, maybe we can have...
This is the newer one.
Could you read the Nelson Pope and Voorhees letter?
Yes.
You want to read it? Yeah, that would be great.
This is dated May 21st, subject Lake Agawam Restoration Plan, Gin Lane, ZBA case number 2988, approved April 26, 2018. The Village of Southampton Zoning Board of Appeals issued a wetlands special permit for the above referenced project on April 26, 2018. Condition number 1 of the permit was as follows. All improvements to the property shall comply with the following plans submitted in connection with this application as revised and updated to ensure areas of low growth through mature natural plant height along shoreline such that views of the lake are facilitated year-round in conformance with the express directive of the Village of Southampton Board of Trustees. The plan reviewed by the ZBA is referenced below and was the subject of the modifications outlined in Condition 1. Lake Agawam Buffer Restoration, prepared by Hollander Design, Landscape Architects Plan, last dated 4/24 of 2018. It is my understanding that a revised Hollander Design Plan dated 2/20 of 2019 has been submitted to the Village of Southampton Board of Trustees for consideration. This plan was forwarded to our office for review of conformance to the condition referenced above. The plan was reviewed with respect to the potential for views of Lake Agawam from a 4 to 5 foot perspective, which would relate to a driver and/or pedestrians in this height range. In review of the plant list alone, there are only 3 species that would be expected to reach maximum growth height shorter than 5 foot height. And I'm not going to state the Latin genus names.
Oh, come on.
All other species have the potential to grow to a full height of 6 to 12 feet for the shrubs and up to 20 feet for the trees. Even considering a sloped bank edge towards Lake Agawam, the proposed plantings are expected to grow taller than 5 foot along the entire edge of the lake. Based on the plan, plants and plant location density, it is expected that at no point will there be any breaks in the shrub screen that would allow for views of the lake along the roadside at or near the noted observer height. As a result, based on this review, it is determined that the proposed plan is not consistent with Condition 1 of the ZBA Wetland Special Permit issued on April 26, 2018. Please feel free to contact me should you have any questions.
Okay.
Which company is providing the other plan? The village plan?
Nelson Pope.
So Nelson Pope and Voorhees would be providing the other plan, but then they weigh in on this plan's
Correct.
validity.
They started with that plan 3 years ago and haven't done anything since, other than review the alternatives, based on the directives of this board and the zoning board.
No, I'm just saying, Nelson, this company is bringing forth a product to the village, right? A plan.
They haven't in 3 years.
But that was their plan.
Starting point, yes.
Okay, so we don't, who would be the vendor who would actually go out and
What?
execute on the plan?
On the village plan, you mean?
Yes.
You would hire a contractor to do it. These guys are only reviewing or preparing the plans, or the
Right.
plans, if you accept the other plans, one or the other, one way or another, all they're doing is preparing a plan and a methodology how to achieve the work. Then the question is who, the contractor who does the work is another question.
So essentially, because we do not have a village engineer,
Nelson was brought in 3
Nelson
years
is
ago.
brought in, you know, hey, can you draw up a plan, as if we had a village engineer, we would tell our village engineer to design something, and then as things come in, our village engineer, again, we contract that out, reviews any other plans that come in.
I'm just noting that they designed the plan, but
That's
they're
the same.
also weighing
Yeah.
in on another
Yeah.
person's
No,
plan.
really,
and is
really
it-
what
it
they,
just-
yeah, no, what they did 3 years ago is DPW / Gary, you know, and the board at the time was looking into doing something around that area. They are our engineer on call, if you will, and mapped out a general thing on what to do. And then, of course, they just
It's
went
not a
in.
reflection on Chick
No,
because he does very good work.
I know exactly what you're saying. It's
You know,
it's
but
a
it's
very
just-
valid point, a very valid question.
To that point, since we're getting late into the season for any kind of planting right now anyway, would the board be more comfortable to find some other neutral party that would develop a plan that would have a view shed that the trustees would like?
No, I think, quite frankly, a public-private partnership that Dan has suggested is absolutely imperative direction to go, because that lake is going to require that for other projects. And you know, yes, he's correct. I guess you've been at it for 4 years. I only know about it for maybe a year and a half. That's not a tremendous amount of time to get the kinks worked out, I don't believe, because you're taking public property here and you're putting on a project that is supported by private entities, and it's got to have a public entity to it. And the public entity to it constantly, whether it's a ZBA or many members of this board, is the view shed. And actually, if you look at Chip's original plan back, I don't know how many years that was, he identified a number of key areas that the plan had to satisfy. And one of them was view shed. So he constantly come up with his view shed. And my frustrating part is, I can't believe it's not something that's can be resolved. You know, you just put in lower plants.
And to that point, if you go with a taller plan, and Rich said earlier, if another board comes in and wants to go cut that thing down, what's going to happen with partnerships then? They're going to say, we're not doing that again. So let's keep repeating myself. Let's just find that middle ground and get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great project, great idea. You know, I realize that the village has got to take a close look at the funds expended on doing the excavation, but doing the excavation is a far better method, I think, than going in there and wicking and using Roundup and creating more of a mess for yourself. So,
Right, and to that end, the original project was maybe a couple hundred. the whole thing, maybe 3, but a couple hundred, maybe, I think it was tossed around at the time, 1,000, to now we're talking at, 3 times that, potentially. So that's something to,
I think it was a little over 100,000 was the original idea. And again, any plan that the village develops, we have complete control over to say, we don't want to put anything in there that'll hurt the environment whatsoever. You all have the power to say, we're not doing that aspect of it, and it won't be part of the plan.
Right.
But what does that leave us with? That leaves us with Phragmites invasive continuing to grow, or denuding the Phragmites and eliminating all the barrier there. Even if we get grants, which is the right thing to do to control runoff, which you've done so well on Job's Lane.
Well, way back in the beginning, actually the first draft that came through showed willow trees every 30 feet that would just grow and be wispy, and you could still mow underneath them. So there are upright plants that you could put in there that would screen, especially, the 800 feet across the water. So it is doable. And then after the 3 years or what have you that cutting is done, then you could add those lower plants in.
Well, I think that's my frustration is I see it's so doable, and then I constantly get these plans time and time again that show a solid wall across there. And, there's many people that enjoy bicycling around there, driving around there, getting a view of the lake.
And I think every time we've seen, the people who are offering this great gift to us come back, in anticipation, we're like, oh, great, we're going to compromise. We're going to find something lower. We're going to get it done. And then the same height comes in again. So it's like,
Gary,
it's tough.
to be honest with you, I thought the same thing, but Dan, your clients are tough negotiators, man. They are really tough.
Like China.
The average height of the Phragmites is what right now? Yeah. I bike down there and I can't say I see much.
I just drove by and I thought I saw a lot in between, but that's...
I don't want to belabor the point. We've gone round and around, but in terms of my clients being tough, I think my clients have been incredibly patient and generous with their resources and their time to try to find some reasonable solution.
Yep.
Rather than make it about aesthetics, they brought on Dr. Goldberg to make it about science. So what we tried to do was, again, to maximize the benefits that you wanted in terms of viewshed. And again, we met with each of the village trustees to try to gauge their interest in the plan that you see here today. And we specifically said that we didn't have any interest in moving forward if there wasn't at least conceptual support for the plan as proposed. That's why we presented it through Dr. Goldberg. To kind of question the kind of motives or the intentions of the people that are behind this is, I think, a disservice to what they've tried to do in cooperation with the village to this point. I think they're incredibly generous. I think they've been incredibly patient. You might not agree with ultimately the aesthetics of the design, but there's a rationale to the design based upon factors that we all identified as a team that we thought best guided the project. It's not a matter of just saying, well, this is so simple, just cut everything in half and we'll be fine. We used Dr. Goldberg very specifically to make sure we could maximize the benefits in terms of water quality and the protection of public health. That's why we were resistant to reducing the plans below what's currently proposed, despite the fact that, again, I need to keep reiterating this, despite the fact that it's consistently lower than what currently exists. And what currently exists is only as thin as it currently exists because the village has repeatedly cut it back over the last few years, without a permit, without a plan, without any approvals. That's why we're here today, and that's why some of the people maybe are frustrated. In fact, at the night of the hearing that Dr. Goldberg presented, the village was out there cutting the Phragmites and the knotweed again that night, without a permit, despite the fact that we were hearing the issue that night. And some of the homeowners are a little frustrated too because they were the only homeowners visited on the entire lake, one of the supporters of the project, by the DEC police to see what they were using on their property in conjunction with their landscaping. Bartlett Landscaping, that manages their landscape for the last 20 or 30 years, has never had the DEC police inspect one of their parcels on a client's property. And yet somehow miraculously, after this hearing, that was the one home on the entire lake that got visited. That might be part of the reason behind them. Again, we're trying for 4 years, we have not said one thing publicly disrespectful to the village. We have not said one thing to criticize the village's efforts. We've come here every meeting in the hopes of reaching a reasonable compromise. We have compromised. We've increased our costs by 50% based upon the recommendations of Dr. Gobler. Not all of our supporters were thrilled with that. They did that because they thought it was better for public health and environmental quality, that it was better for village residents. That wasn't done to beautify the project. It was done based upon science and the recommendations of Dr. Gobler. So again, I apologize for belaboring the point, but I want to set the record straight in terms of what we've tried to do. I think we've worked in good faith for 4 years to try to address every single concern that's been raised through multiple plans and changes to the plan and respect the comments and with respect to comments that you made and previous administrations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
And Dan, we do appreciate all the efforts.
I'm not going to just keep on. I just want the record to show that myself or anyone in my public employ has not contacted the DEC and reported anyone on the lake. I have never contacted the DEC to report anybody in my life.
I don't think anybody implied that, but thank you.
Yep. Okay. So,
We go the other way first. We go that way
It's
first.
silent down there. What are the thoughts down there?
always turn to you around. Well, I'm in favor of sending this off since it's a new one so it conforms to the same thing that we've done previously to Council Open Boards.
I agree with that.
William?
Just wondering if we are determined to do things differently than these residents down there have proposed. If they just say, thanks, cut us out, what does that do to the cost for us of the whole thing if it's no longer a partnership?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's still things that need to be looked at, where we can fill up the shortfall with the grant, how much the price can be reduced if this extra $350 with excavating and removal of debris is not an accurate number, if it's a fraction of that. So, as I said last time, it was more about the numbers to me. What kind of gets done and how it gets put in, I think, is negotiable to some. I don't know, but I'd like to see something happen. I don't know where we go there, but I think costs, I asked last time and you came up with the numbers, whether they can be reduced or not, or if we can mitigate that with grants or something, or if somebody knows the governor in the group, that might be able to get some money from Albany, since we're the worst body of water in the state.
Just quick, I don't want to discount the amount of money that they want to throw to this project. I think it's a fantastic. CPF has indicated they would be very interested in funding rain gardens, retention
took 3 meetings.
gardens.
We've heard a lot of these people possibly interested. Where's the money? Show me the money. Where's the money? If we don't get it from them, where, as Bill said, where are we getting it from? Now, we don't need the answer. I want to know the answer at some time.
So Gary, I have a question about the concrete. I mean, was the concrete put there to shore up the east side of the lake, or was it just a disposal? We had concrete, we threw it in there. What was the purpose of the concrete?
It was to shore up and raise the roadway. Agawam, Gin Lane, even when I was in high school, would flood out. It would be a foot underwater in heavy rains if we didn't have a pipe.
You mean that corner of Gin Lane would be a
The
foot
road would be
underwater?
completely gone.
Okay.
Same thing with Pond Lane. The water would come up there. So over time, what they did is they just took any project. This is before my employ here. Any sidewalk, any curb they had, they just dumped it right along the edge, and they backfilled it. On the Pond Lane side, it actually widened the area there a little bit so that the road could comfortably be there.
Because, we're thinking we're going to remove all of that, and I want to get an idea of removing it, what effect that might have, again, especially if we have wind coming from the west, which it does very often. I'm just wondering if it's going to have a bad effect on the road again.
I would think if you stay 10 feet or so off the edge of the pavement, you'd be okay there, because there's probably additional concrete buried underneath that grassy shoulder as well.
Sure, please.
Okay, just want to make sure we're not removing something that we're going to be concerned about later on.
Okay. So I guess we'll move ahead and we'll run this through the process and we'll go from there.
Okay.
So next we have public hearings. In the public hearing, we have proposed local law to clarify the height of residences where a portion of the roof is flat.
Hear a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll jump in.
Please do.
Good.
This is
Thank you.
This is your fourth public hearing on this matter. At the last public hearing, we were asked the building inspector to go back and talk to Glynis, who did the review of as-built conditions and regulations, which was part of a planning commission report back in 2015 or so, which prompted this board to adopt changes in the height regulations. In particular, the height regulations, whereby based on lot size, you had to be a certain lot size or height. Lots less than 20 would be 30 feet, 20 to 40 would be 33, and above 40 would be 35. However, based on houses that were using flat roofs to maximize their height and mass, the report also suggested that the height of any flat roofs, which were defined as having a roof pitch flatter than 7 on 12, 7 inches a rise for every 12 inches of run, that would be considered a so-called flat roof, and that the height of that building had to be 7 feet below the maximums that I just expressed. So, for example, on a 40,000 square foot lot, rather than 35 feet, your flat roof had to be 28 feet. The report that Glynis had a suggestion about flat roofs that over 27 feet, no more than 5% of the roof be flat. And you had heard descriptions, I think that was pretty illustrative, but we went back to Glynis to get some more clarification on that. And the building inspector received that. He reported it to me, but basically what we have written meets the intent of what Glynis was trying to do, which meets the intent of what you tried to incorporate. So at this point, I think both the building inspector, they believe the number that you presented, basically saying that no more than 5% of the total roof area can be flat, because we were getting a hybrid. There was an all or nothing, and we were getting houses in between, certain portions being flat. And the question is, should that entire house have to be reduced to 27 feet, or can it be a portion, incorporate a small portion of it to be flat? So this law would allow a small portion, 5%, no more than 5% of the total roof area to be flat and still not have to meet the lower roof height, which I think, and of course all this is subject to the Architectural Review Board, which is what has been occurring since 2015. In some instances, in many instances, the issues that have been reported have all been approved by the Architectural Review Board. But nonetheless, this board, we're closing up a loophole. The language that we have in here, we've received a report from your Planning Commission, you received a report from the Suffolk County Planning Commission, all supportive of the amendment. I believe you can take any further comments, and if there's nothing else and you desire to close this, if it's in a position, you may consider it notice of adoption.
Great. Do we have any comments? No. No comments from the public? Any comments from the trustees?
Good.
With that, I would make a motion that, I guess I have to close the
public hearing.
I will make a motion to close the proposed local law to clarify the height of residence where a portion of the roof is flat.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
And then I'll make a motion to accept the proposed local law to clarify the height of residences where a portion of the roof is flat.
Be
That
local law,
resolution is in your package.
be local law number 6.
6.
Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Yashtremski?
Aye.
Trustee Allen?
Aye.
Mayor Irving?
Aye.
Trustee McGann?
Aye.
Trustee Hattrick?
We,
Translate that for
they say there's no on your lips, but there's wee in your eyes.
All the way home.
Communications to the board. Southampton Town public hearings.
This is, we received a letter from the town clerk of the town of Southampton about public hearings regarding a overlay zone, a overlay zone for Hampton Bays downtown district, and also the notice of a public hearing to consider amending town code to permit vending vehicles as accessory to pre-existing farm stands.
Could you explain
And
that?
they're letting us know this as a matter of public record, or
Well, yeah, any time that we propose any,
we send, yeah, it's
we have
standard
to
procedure,
send,
so-
they do the same, and I think it's
And the
important.
vending things that they're, the overlays, clearly there, but the vending vehicles would only apply to whatever their properties are within the town
It
and
would be
not,
in the town.
and not within our village.
Correct.
And I think
in
it
the
only
past-
applies to farm stands and stuff, doesn't it?
Well,
Yeah, that's what
I
they're
can
looking
report on these. So number one, in the past, I don't think it was your practice to just indicate what communications this board received. In particular, these are pretty routine communications. In theory, you have the opportunity, if you want to comment at town board, if there was any village impact. These, particularly the Hampton Bays overlay zone, after a long comprehensive plan, they're making amendments specific to Hampton Bays. So that, I don't think that has any impact. The next one, it's interesting, has to do with food trucks.
Right.
Currently, the town amended their code, and they allow, as an accessory to a restaurant, for the restaurant to have a food truck in their parking lot as a special exception use. Requires someone to get special exception. There's a long list of conditions. One of the conditions is the food truck can't operate while the restaurant is open. So the theory is you're not expanding your business by putting a food truck and now bringing other patrons because now I have greater capacity. They allow it, but that's, I think this is a similar approach on an pre-existing farm stand. So they're allowing a food truck, which is interesting, that they're allowing that to happen. This is probably more of an issue because it allows something in a residential zone, agricultural zone, as opposed to an accessory on a commercial property. But again, I don't see any impact on the village unless you wanted to go down that path. It gives us something to look at and maybe model or otherwise.
Are they the only excuse me.
The only two things that I see are, that they appear to allow entertainment as well at these farm stands. And we do have, probably a stone's throw from our village, one of the busiest farm stands there is. And if we add to that,
Is that in the village or in the town?
it's just outside. So essentially,
A couple of them are just outside.
right.
yeah.
So
But I know which one you're
that's
talking
where it
about.
may have some impact with regards to how many uses and what our input is as to whether or not we want just outside of our downtown where people may pick pumpkins and then come down into our village to dine or have food. If it's a one-stop shop where they have entertainment, food, and their pumpkins.
Also as a competitive thing, so
They may buy
so are you
more.
saying we may want to weigh in on it as a competitive thing? And also the fact that it's an additional resource that our village resources, meaning our fire department and EMS and such, so may
Just
be added to,
could be.
is that what you're saying? Potentially, perhaps?
Just
Making a
wetting
statement.
your minds.
I don't think it is it?
We have the big one, and then we have the large one that just got larger. Is that in the village, the one you're talking about, right?
On the county road,
On
just
County Road.
east of North Main Street.
Is that village?
Is that village?
That's in
I don't know
village.
if it is.
Is that
It's in the village.
Is that all village? Is that all, you believe?
It's all village, yeah.
That's the best you can
And
do.
there's a farm stand
That's
there.
right.
I don't have the map.
But does this apply to that?
No.
No, it's just Hampton Bays.
No.
No.
The
Two
second
different
one
things.
might,
Talking
as
about
a matter of
the
fact.
one on
Yeah, two
Montauk
different
Highway.
amendments.
The vending trucks.
Yeah.
Very large
trucks.
one
We
on
have one
Montauk
that's right
Highway.
around, which is,
So-
you could throw a stone and hit.
Right.
I'm confused. So we have a farm stand for whatever they're selling, whether it's pumpkins or veggies or whatever, and now we have a food truck
Yeah, I don't know how they're doing it.
on the property with
Yeah.
the farm stand where they're now selling food, and on top of it, we have entertainment. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
They're
It's,
allowing entertainment.
Yeah, this
They kind of do what the
have-
North Fork did. I want to
Right.
see where they go
You
with the
might want to look
wineries.
at it, because, as Russell said, it might have an impact, but the current code, someone who's performing agricultural production on the property is allowed to sell their products that they grow
Right.
off of the site, provided they get a farm stand permit for a certain period of time, not the full year. They're allowed to sell 20% of products that are not
Not.
grown. There never has been an issue of allowing pre-made or prepared foods, such a, like a
Candy-
food truck
candy,
or
yeah.
entertainment or otherwise. So this is an expansion of a whole concept of what was originally allowed, particularly since all the agricultural lands are in residential zones.
Did-
Do they
So
actually
did
grow
the town allow
pumpkins
this, or
there?
was
I thought
this,
they brought them in.
Proposed law.
so to me,
That's
so
my
was it just,
thinking. They don't grow them there.
was it, no, my
They
point is,
place them.
for the vending
They
trucks,
just
was it
place
just
them
not
all over
written,
the
so it's
property?
ambiguous? Did it prohibit it before and this changes it, or is this just saying, hey, we're going to throw it on there?
I presume they did, but I...
No, they
Well, what
just
was it
place
before?
them
Was it
there.
ambiguous, meaning there was no actual,
There's
it
multiple conversations, so I'm trying to follow.
was prohibited, that's what I said, so it was specifically prohibited, whereas now they're allowing.
So hypothetically, Mr. Farmer, Ms. Farmer has a farm stand, and in the summer, they're selling tomatoes, cucumbers, and the 20% of items that that they don't grow.
Like pies
and
things of
whatever.
that sort.
Candy
So
apples.
then it comes.
Not prepackaged.
Right, so now it's December, and there's a bratwurst
Well, they're
stand.
usually closed.
Right, but now they have an accessory, right? They have
I
a
don't think it
little-
was meant for
No,
that. I
it's
think
like
the
in
accessory
summer.
was to be used for the entire time that they're open.
Yes.
Like the
So
milk
they're
pail.
going to have I thought, okay, so I don't get it. I'm not following you.
So the food truck, would it be, I don't know, we'll say for instance, for arbitrary, a hot dog truck that they're allowed to sit there because that would qualify for that 20% rule?
Yeah, I mean, and we're all speculating. I think it'd be important to go and look at what the proposed law, rather than
Right. Which is why we were
you can
informed of it.
determine, as Russell says, is whether or not you want to provide the town board any comments.
And again, how they decided in the end, but at least we can evaluate it and provide a written opinion on it, whether we like it or not.
I think it's a good idea.
Good point,
Pres-
Administrator.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
First one, is a non-issue, but second one, yeah.
One a month is good.
Not bad. All right, you snuck a good one in there. Proved your value tonight.
So we got suggested resolutions?
Entertain a motion resolved that the reading of the minutes of the public session of May 9th, 2019 be dispensed with, and that those minutes be accepted as filed by the village administrator, and that the actions taken at that meeting be and hereby are ratified and approved.
Make the motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion resolved that the Village Board of Trustees authorize the settlement of an outstanding claim with AEC Engineering in the amount of $16,000.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Discussion?
So we have to, don't we have to vote on it first?
Well, we can
before
have a discussion.
Discussion.
Okay, that's,
So, the village has had an outstanding claim for work that was performed here at Village Hall, and there was a discrepancy as to the amount that was owed, and we had made an agreement or offered an agreement to settle that amount, and this is the amount that we'd agreed to settle upon.
I remember that discussion.
Any more discussion?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
correct.
This was the email with the, okay, we agreed
And
no.
we sat around the table and discussed.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Resolved that the claims for the warrants dated May 21st, 2019, totaling $180,137.43, warrant number 16 of the general fund, and $90,756.75, warrant number 13 of the capital reserve fund, be audited and approved.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
invoices over $1,000. All-American Awards, $5,236.46. That's for badges for the fire department. Daniel Berry, $1,000. That's a medical reimbursement. Cook, Marin and Associates, $6,494. That's a fire department accident policy. Brian Cook, $1,000. That's a medical reimbursement. Avery Dennis Jr., $1,000, medical reimbursement. Laura Diviny, thank you, $1,000, that's a medical reimbursement. Robert Diviny, $1,000, it's a medical reimbursement. Diane's Signs, $4,510, that's graphics and lettering for fire department vehicles. Robert S.A. Sr., $1,000, is a medical reimbursement. Everguard Servicing, Inc., $14,551.80, that's playground resurfacing, and that was voted on by public referendum, permissive referendum a few meetings ago by this village board. Fluid
Is that the one in the Roscoe development? I think it is.
Yes.
Yes. Fluid Imagery, $5,890.50. That's a new router and equipment to increase Wi-Fi for all of the departments in DPW and the monthly charges, maintenance charges from Fluid Imagery. Galls LLC, $1,345.64, police uniforms. Herrick Hardware, $2,062.29, various materials and supplies for all departments. Randall Herring, $1,000, that's medical reimbursement. Ronald Hill, $1,000, medical reimbursement. Island Tech Services, $5,236, that's a service contract for the server for the fire department and a rugged, tough book laptop for the ambulance. Jones and Bartlett Learning, LLC, $1,276.44. That's CPR training supplies for the ambulance corps. Peter Kerwin, $1,000, medical reimbursement. Kruger International, Inc., $4,176. That's for folding chairs for the meeting room at the fire department. Long Island Landscaping and Masonry, $2,400. That's hydro seed berm at Moses Lane Park. National Grid, $3,398.55. That's utilities for multiple locations. North Fork Design Studio, $5,018. That's shirts, sweatshirts, and etc. for the Cooper's staff. New York State Department of Labor, Bureau of Public Work, $16,000. That is the settlement of the claim for the prior village board resolution just passed. Old Town Development, LLC, $26,216. That's a reimbursement of building department fees as per village board resolution on 5/9. Pete and Son Corp., $1,776. Shrubs and plants for police department landscaping. PERMA, $3,350.52. That's the New York State Workers' Compensation assessment for the year end. Jason Parembi, $1,000, medical reimbursement. Pro Trainings, LLC, $1,021, 100-unit subscription for bloodborne pathogens for the ambulance corps. John Reister, $1,000, medical reimbursement. Riverhead Brake Service, LLC, $1,044. That's the New York State Vehicle Inspection for fire department trucks and trailers. Testing Unlimited Corp., $1,900. Those are aerial tests for the fire department aerial trucks. Vincent Toomey, $1,851.89. That's outside labor council for the village. Town of Southampton, $20,646.34. That's an agreement that the town has with the village for education and government channel. Truck King International, $3,816.31. That's to replace the turbocharger and adapter for a highway dump truck number 46. Vector Airport Systems, $5,457. That's the annual system warranty and maintenance. James White, $1,000, medical reimbursement.
It's a new airplane you just got.
see that say?
Capital disbursements. Pershing Company, $15,770. That's the plumbing contractor at the ambulance barn. Jeffrey Butler, P.E., $9,950. That's the architect contractor at the ambulance barn. Rollins Electrical, $54,211.75. That's the electrical contract at the ambulance barn. W&G Service, $10,825. That's for condenser and coil for HVAC at the firehouse.
I have a question.
Yes.
Fluid imagery,
Yes.
the upgrade for DPW,
Yes.
is that an upgrade we need throughout all of our departments?
My understanding is that Julie, are you a little familiar with that? Or- okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, my understanding is that we were having, especially with our time and attendance that is cloud-based, and we were having trouble, actually connecting, and so we were having a lot of trouble with the programming there, so we got a stronger, more robust router.
So is fluid imagery, what did they do for us?
Fluid imagery is our, essentially our contracted IT department. We don't have a local IT department, so they manage our systems.
Right. They install all the
That's our
computers,
computer.
they do all the security, the software, everything.
Right.
That's our Geek Squad.
They're our geek squad.
Yeah, Geek Squad.
That we hire out.
No other questions? All in favor? Entertain a motion resolved that the Board of Trustees approve the hiring of the following employees at Cooper's Beach for the 2019 season listed below. You want me to read them all? or-
No.
You probably should.
Assistant Beach Manager Cameron Highsmith, $15 an hour. Lifeguards, David A. Nichols, Head Lifeguard, $23 an hour. Mike Purcell, $21 an hour. Maggie Purcell, $15 an hour. Caroline Oakland, $15 an hour. David Nichols, $16 an hour. Patrick Maloney, $16 an hour. Jordan Nichols, $15 an hour. Parker West, $13.50 an hour. Jaden Wilson Pepitone, $13.50 an hour. Evelyn Purcell, $13.50 per hour. Carolyn Palumbo, $15 an hour. Ray Sweeney, $13.50 per hour. Carolyn Wetter, $13.50 an hour. Michael Cardo, $17 an hour. And Matthew Giuliano at $13.50 an hour.
Those are all lifeguards?
Those are all lifeguards. The rates are generated by the number of years of service they have in their experience. In the ticket booth, Myra Nation, $9.50. Kyla Seymour, $9.50. Riley Zorko, $9. Lane Yastrzemski, $9. Autumn Wilson, $9. Shay Rodriguez, $9. Renata Burnett, $9. Beach attendants, William Hattrick, $10.
Thank you, I needed that. Looking for some extra work this summer, huh?
Emmett Wetter, $9.50. Teddy Raffle, $11. Will Raffle, $10. Matthew Medio, $10. James Malone, $10. Daniel Alacaseo, $9.50. Sean Godfrey, $9.50. Ben Luce, plus $10. Charles Nichols, $9.50. Griffin Schwartz, $9.50. Thayer Schwartz, $9. Turner West, $9. Darren Fahey, $9. Aiden Foster, $9. Do I hear a motion?
Make the motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
One abstention. Those are the suggested resolutions.
Into discussion now, right?
Okay.
Discussion items. The first item, we have Conic Bay Antique Auto Club Tour of the South Fork, October 26, 2019.
So this had come to the board previously, and I was asked to go back to them and request a certificate of insurance and an indemnity form, as well as the route, which is what you see attached there. So everything looks in order. I did indeed also check with Tim Rumpf for the soccer group,
Good.
and because they do actually go through November, he said that now that he knows this date, he will arrange for that to be an away game for them, so that there won't be a conflict, and I thanked him and said that was great
That's
to work
awesome.
together.
Because this would be a great
Yeah.
addition to our repertoire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something completely different that I know people have been asking for a
Yeah,
while. So.
and Craig, AKA Steve Ritter,
Yes, yeah.
has actually great plans to, if it works in the future, he thinks it can really expand more and become,
Yeah,
a bigger
no, it's definitely
event for
worth
us.
giving it a shot, so I
Yeah.
thank you for
Sure.
working that out with Tim.
Yeah.
There's nothing else. I'll entertain a motion authorizing permission for the Conic Bay Antique Auto Club to hold a tour of the South Fork, October 26, 2019.
I'll make that motion.
For a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the next item, we have the Southampton Village Veterans Parade, May 27th and July 4th, 2019.
So that
Pretty
is
pro forma.
standard, pro forma.
I don't think we should allow it.
Hopefully it's all game.
Troublemakers, you know?
You make that motion.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion.
What's the council?
I just want to add to the motion that you're also authorizing the police department to post appropriate signage and/or notices regarding parking restrictions for those parades.
Correct. Good point.
Good point.
Motion by the mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
In the council.
And then we have Capstone Event Group, Hampton, that's the Hamptons
Hamptons
Marathon.
Marathon.
September 28, 2019.
Yeah.
So Capstone is now it's still the same two women that organize it, actually, but Capstone is their partner in it.
Who is
And it's actually an event coordinator, so.
coordinator?
Yeah. And they did it last year as well. It again is September 28th, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. They will again be using the high school Friday evening for registration, and again Saturday morning for registration, and again using, village police as assistance, ambulance, and requesting the full support as we have done in the years past. The route is scheduled to be the same route, unless, Chief, if there's any concerns with the route as it was last year. Any?
And
Okay.
Julie, did we want to put in the resolution what we agreed we were going to have as the fee?
Did you
Is it
mention
fee?
it to them? Did you?
I did not.
Okay.
I reached out, but I think we
Okay.
should include it. What was that number?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Who am I giving it to, Chief? Oh, Chief, okay. So what the village, we were proposing was that for the police, offering the police services, that they would pay $12,000.
Right. But they
In
will also-
addition,
yeah,
they would be paying for the carts, the golf carts that
the
we
additional cards.
supply.
Yep.
It's an additional fee.
Yes,
Well,
and
which is in the past has been,
exactly.
moved around. What, do we know the numbers that, I'm sorry to hit you with this, that they've provided to the area, meaning the different groups they've donated to with their, any rough idea? Are we 3 years in now to this?
Yeah, 3 years into it. It's shifted a little bit in that the hospital is a big beneficiary, as is SYS, because they do so much volunteer support with them. The first year, they also had given a small amount to the Art Center because they were using the Art Center for registration, but now it's much easier for them to just use the high school.
Right.
And they'd also given a small amount to the ambulance, and I believe also to Flying Point Foundation for Autism. So
that
I
be
have
the
to
same?
check to see if they are, and I'm happy to do that. I can check with Amanda and Diane to ask them if that is still going to be the beneficiaries for this year. I'm happy
We
to
can
do
move it
that.
around, that's one thing too, but I do know that that was always the premise for
Yes.
allowing this, is that they are
Yes.
going to fuel
Right.
generated funds from it back into the community.
And I think SYS was one of the biggest recipients because, again, they also support very heavily with volunteers
think the hospital was a
And the
fairly
hospital
big-
is also a very large recipient, yes.
But then also people have also said, since it's the village being used, and the village streets being
Exactly, that we
used, the
wanna
village
make
streets
sure.
and the neighborhoods being inconvenienced,
Absolutely,
you know.
that we should.
And I recall that number being heavily weighted outside of the village in that first discussion a couple of years back,
Correct.
that most of the funds went outside of the village and
Yes.
not into the
Yeah,
village. And I
yeah.
think we wanted to, you had
well,
recommended.
The first year, it was SYS, the hospital, the ambulance, Southampton Arts Center, and Flying Point Foundation for Autism.
But the amount that was donated was heavily.
Was definitely
proportions
much
were-
larger for the hospital and for SYS, certainly, yes, absolutely. So I can ask them what their planned, all things being equal to last year, if they would be doing the same amounts, and if they could share with us. That's perfectly
All
fine.
good causes.
Exactly, yeah. And also, if there's a particular cause that the village would like them to consider, I think that's okay, too.
That would
It
be
is a
great.
big
Well,
event, though.
It is a
It's a
very
big
large
event, and the
event.
expense of of law enforcement alone is huge.
Yeah.
But that can be quantified because it's an actual salary thing.
Right.
What can be quantified, but not in the way of salaries, is what our volunteers do with our standby
Right.
from our ambulance and our first
Fire
responders
department.
and fire department alone.
Yes.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So
So why don't I go back to them and ask them what their plan is?
yeah.
And who their beneficiaries are for
Sure.
this year,
'Cause
and also
generally,
get
because they
numbers
say
from
that,
last
they let
year.
us know who they're going to be somewhere.
Absolutely.
So we'll wait on this and bring it up at
See
the
where
next
the-
meeting.
Do they know about that number for the police
I have a
protection?
He has
call
a
into
call
them.
in.
Okay, so it's not agreed upon yet.
Correct, but it's in line with what,
Well, it was mentioned last year, too.
yes.
Yeah, because they were a little bit less they paid last year.
Yes. Yes.
So was it 12K plus carts?
Yes.
Plus cards.
So they're paying us to cover
Our costs.
Yes.
It actually, right, it actually is a
Which is
reduced rate.
standard, what we do when we
So
authorize
essentially, if you
stuff.
look in here, there's a contract rate, and it's an actual hourly rate. So essentially, we receive in the clerk's office a listing of the number of hours and cost from the police department, and they agree to pay based upon that schedule. In this particular case, because of the good cause, we are negotiating a flat rate, which is, I won't say significantly, but somewhat lower than what actual cost would be.
Which is, now, that's just for the village, SVPD, right? The other agencies that come outside, they get paid directly, is that correct, Chief? Okay.
But they donate also fairly generously to all the causes
Yeah.
in the
That's,
community.
right, so that's
Yes.
why we can see a
First
public
year,
good.
yeah.
So essentially what we're doing is gifting public funds, but for a public gift,
Yes,
public benefit.
Which is multiples of.
Correct.
yes. But the let's face it, it is a large event, and large events nowadays, and where we're located require, in the world we live in, a high degree of safety. So the law enforcement presence alone is huge with our own. We bring in agencies all the way to the state. We get the town, the county, the state, the sheriff. So every agency comes in. The county brings their mobile unit. So there's a lot of assets that come out to run this, just so people know.
Yep. So we'll wait until we get a list. And the next one is Creative Concepts Free Sunscreen Program.
So this also we discussed, I think, at the April 23rd meeting. And again, I was asked to go back to them and request a certificate of insurance and an indemnity form, which they have provided as well. And obviously, I think they'd like to get started as soon as possible with putting this display up. It would just be at Cooper's Beach. The town is doing it apparently at a number of their beaches, but for the village, they asked to just start it at Cooper's Beach.
So what does it say on it?
So it will say,
Is there any corporate mention on here? Who does it?
yeah,
Who's
so
doing it?
it'll say the Village of Southampton, and I've just sent them our seal. So they will use that, and then it'll say sponsored by Southampton Stony Brook, because that's who's underwriting the cost of it.
So let's say the village and the hospital will not say whoever the actual vendor is supplying these
I do not
machines?
believe it does, and I've asked her for a complete mock-up,
Okay.
which she needed our
Has
seal
this
to
been
do.
discussed with the people who have rented the
Well, I was just going to say,
concession?
we have concession people who, part of what they
Sell-
do is sell sunscreen, and we're putting the free thing out in front.
Yeah, but that's not going to be their driver for their
No, but I think maybe we might want to mention it to them, because maybe they won't want to go
buying it.
invest heavily into the sunscreen.
Good point. Okay.
Although there's baby sunscreen and
Yeah,
there's
no,
30
there
and
is.
the 50 and the
This will
70
just
and
be
the
a
100 and
That's
30.
really-
It's a
copper
30.
tone,
right.
copper tone waterproof.
And looking at this, I can't imagine that they're going to be able to supply enough sunscreen for the...
I know.
No, look at the size of
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, it's more of a promotional to...
Yeah.
It's like an awareness.
You aware.
It's an
of the
education
fact that-
But then again,
It's a very
but
nice
thinking ahead,
Very nice.
is it just whetting the appetite, so then next year they say, we're going to put 20 of these out there, so...
Right,
Which,
right.
whatever,
Or
not
at
the
all
worst
of
thing
our
in the world, but-
beaches or whatever. Or at the park, because I asked them that. I said, are you trying to put it at Agawam Park also? And they said, for this year, we were just asked to do it. We want to see how it works. We've done it in other areas. The town's on board with it, and Stony Brook is underwriting it. So, but they will
Just want
come
to
out.
make sure that the vendor is not, the people that are renting are not upset over it.
And they are responsible to maintain it and refill it. They'll be coming out every week, so. But I'll check, I'll let them know.
Okay.
Are we good with it?
Or do you want me to go back to that?
Entertain a motion to allow Creative Concepts to provide free sunscreen program at Cooper's Beach for the 2019 summer.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Comments from board members. Trustee Skrimsky.
I'm good, other than have everybody have a happy and safe Memorial Day coming up, and let's all remember the true purpose of it. It's not for sales and burgers and beers. So it's a nice side effect, but let's remember what it's about. That's all we got.
Thank you.
And we just celebrated D-Day,
Yes.
75th anniversary.
Right.
Yep.
Amazing to that point. The only thing I would like to say is thank you to the landscapers who've converted over to their electric leaf blower equipment. We've now been renamed Quiet Hampton.
Oh, yeah?
We actually got a couple calls from people saying, "It's so quiet, thank you." Yeah, so far on day 2, it's been working out nicely, and again, the landscapers have been terrific, and we even had a battery shortage because there was such a shift. There was a confusion apparently that the town of Southampton had put this law forward, so a lot of people went to the commercial equipment producers and were buying equipment and not realizing where this was taking place.
Jay would take credit for that, too.
I will say that our ads and how we've gotten word out to the public, we've had numerous emails from people asking for certain clarifications or people stopping in, all just for purposes of gaining further information. So it
So squared.
does seem to be effective.
Good.
And thank you, Julie. Those are really good ads that you put together. And Russell, I know you get a lot of the questions and with Eileen and Mimi, so.
Yeah.
And the only other thing is to create, I wanted to give everybody a heads up. This would be of particular interest to anybody who's a vendor or a restaurant owner, as I see a restaurant owner sitting in our board, which is that the county has adopted a local law a county law with regards to the use of polystyrene foam, and that takes effect January 1st. So no longer will you be able to use that for food packaging. And then the other county law that was put forward is that if you wish to have a straw, you have to request it. And I know, Wayne, you and I spoke about it today because the town
Does
has,
that apply to the village, though? The county law?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
one goes to us, town doesn't, but the county does.
right, and that takes effect January 1st. But interestingly, the town has passed a law not to have plastic straws
Effective May 8th.
at all, which,
Unless, under the American for Disabilities Act,
Act, right.
you need to use a straw
Right.
and you can request one.
And some of our, yes.
Request a plastic straw or request a paper?
Plastic straw.
And it's actually a plastic straw and a plastic stir, not just the straw.
Yeah, there that goes.
Yeah, how are we going to get that milkshake up?
Mustache. Okay, thank you. Trustee Allen? Trustee McGann?
I don't really have much more to say other than everyone stay safe over Memorial Day weekend, and hopefully we'll see you in the park for our celebration, and that's all I have to say.
I'll second that motion.
Trustee Hattrick?
That's it.
That's it? Do you have more to say?
No, only when Bill
Okay.
says something do I jump.
I'm not giving you a chance.
Just in regards to your comment on leaf blowers, I actually noticed it a lot quieter. It was amazing, you know. it
Well, I'm
was-
going to figure it out as we get closer to the weekend, because people
Wednesday
usually
and
get there,
Thursday, yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Let's be like this.
I did have a guy using one across the street from my house, so I just went over there with the ad from the newspaper and handed it to him. And didn't say anything and walked away.
I did use my little plug-in.
The gas one?
Yeah, he was using the gas one.
It takes all 5 seconds to blow off my porch, but I think I need a new one. It sounds a little loud to me, but maybe it doesn't down the road. You know.
Right.
They got a broom.
Oh, yes, sure.
The farmer's market is going to start.
Yay.
Presented by Chamber of Commerce. I get these little cheat sheets. And it begins Sunday and will be held on the east grounds of 25 Jobs Lane, which is SAC, on Sundays from 9 to 2. Certainly something to go and check out. I'm not sure how much fresh
9
produce
o'clock
they'll
it's
have.
starting on a Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Didn't it used to start later on a Sunday?
I think they like to get started very early, those farmers
early.
market people.
Only two were from church.
And then in the business district, there's quite a few new stores that have popped up in the
Yay.
past week or so. I think Job's Lane's a little weak, but Main Street's filled in pretty nicely. And it was like, what did we count, 12 or
12,
something?
yeah, 12 new stores.
And didn't you
good.
say
Terrific.
a couple of them,
Yes.
or
Year
potentially
round.
year-round ones?
Yes. Yeah.
Pop-ups, which is just the way it is now, but at least it's a filled store for the winter, for the summer.
Yep.
And some of them are from England, so we have a little foreign
Yeah.
touch here.
I think
It's
actually
exciting.
quite a few of them are from
Yeah.
England.
I'm loving that.
It's kind of interesting.
Trusting people with
Yeah.
perfume or selling clothes?
The
The
language
new stores
barrier
are clothing,
there with that
clothing and home
accent.
goods,
Oh, yeah.
and children's.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which is interesting.
And then we have the Memorial Day Parade coming up, which is very important and a great thing for people to stand and appreciate our past veterans. And you know, on that note, we have a great photo of Charlie in his younger years, appreciating a unknown soldier at his grave.
Isn't that the best?
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It looks the same.
Isn't that adorable? How old were you, Mr. Styler?
4 years old, right, Charlie?
Oh, isn't that great?
Oh, it's
Yes.
Please do. You have to come up to the podium, though.
Coming.
Or a videographer.
Just so people know that that photograph
State
was
your name,
taken. Oh, Charles Styler. That photograph was taken 75 years ago at the unknown soldier's grave in Cypress Hill Cemetery. The reason I brought it with me is to make sure that people remember the men and women that made the ultimate sacrifice for this country. And we should all remember them.
We should.
Even if it's only for one day a year, we should remember every one of them that has made that sacrifice. Thank you.
Charlie, well said.
Very well said.
And we should.
Good night.
And that's quite a picture. I hope you hold on to that.
That's great.
It's
Yes, it
actually,
is.
the news article is very interesting, and the news on the backside of that article is interesting. So, and Charlie is so right. We should, all of us, take a moment during Memorial Day and in our own way, thank those that have served and those that have lost their lives.
What
Certainly.
time is the Memorial Day activity?
It starts at
10:45,
10:45.
yes.
If you're going to march, you should be at the Presbyterian Church at 10:15, and then you'll start walking at 10:45 and head down to Agawam Park for the service at 11. And I believe it's
You have a long way to go.
Presbyterian Church's new minister is going to be doing the benediction.
Pastor Sarah Bigwood.
Correct.
Yes, she's terrific. Yeah.
That's nice.
Just a couple of quick other things. We have Memorial Day coming up here, and I got to say, the Highway Department and the Parks Department and the Building Department and all of them have done just such a spectacular job. You know, there was a little comment made by somebody about the striping over on, Main Beach there and the Towns Beach. I went by at 9 o'clock, I think, to check the striping, and there's the guys. They had about 3/4 of it done already. They're going like crazy back and forth with the striping machine.
At our beach? In Cooper's or?
No, the one
No, in front of the Bathing Corporation
yeah.
in Agawam.
It was done.
They were incredible. And what I couldn't figure out is how they changed the color, because they would strike white, and then all of a sudden there would be a bunch of running around, and then they'd do the blue handicaps. And I go, how did you guys do that? But they did a spectacular job, and I think all the beaches are looking pretty good, and certainly they've been coming in and getting the beach stickers.
Yes, we hit 2019 today was given to Mrs. Antoletti. Many know she received number 2019 of 2019.
Today alone?
Today.
2000
Well, no, I mean so far this year. So
2000
today we hit the
passes have-
2019. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. Now you know why, Coopers and everything is, on the height of the season, it ends up being
Quite
so
busy.
busy.
And actually, if I
That's
could
just
just add,
village. That's just the
That's just
village
that's just residents.
That's not counting
But-
the others. That's just village.
Oh.
Correct. If I could just add something to Mayor,
Got
about
mine
we are
wrong.
in the season and so forth, and I thank currently the first responders for the work they're doing, and I thank them in advance for what will be, again, a busy season, because there's already been 2 incidents up on 39 just in the last 2 weeks. No fatalities.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness now, but anyway, statistically it happens. But yeah, two incidents already. One with a vehicle rollover, and one with a multiple vehicle accident. So that one took a little while. So again, I thank first responders and police. What will be a busy season. It started already, and I implore people to please be careful and be patient, because you're going to get backed up. It's going to happen. You're going to be stuck somewhere out here. So please be
Particularly
patient.
on County Road 39, that is some difficult road.
Yeah, but when that accident there, it spills over to the side roads, and it's going to happen. So please, do the best we can.
Yep. So I'll leave it on that. Everybody be safe over Memorial Day weekend. We have the second public comment. Any public wants to make a comment? No?
Well, this popcorn stand.
With no further public comments, a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing contractual matters.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.